after I gave birth. I was out of the house. I was worried about getting back to my part-time job. I was worried about running errands. I wish I had taken time to just heal and relax and just exist. I do think that beating myself up and going too far, too fast, too soon absolutely contributed to some postpartum depression and anxiety. I did not set myself up for success.
Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started. I am thrilled to have Courtney coming back to tell her birth story. Courtney now has a 7-year-old, and what she went through in pregnancy, what she went through in her labor, and how she has managed postpartum, et cetera, and raising the 7-year-old is absolutely amazing. And I think those life skills just need to be shared. Ashley and I has been talking about Courtney's induction and her life story for so long that I'm just excited to have you here today, Courtney.
Thanks for having me. I love talking with you, Care, and my birth story has been such an integral part of the beginning part of my parenting journey. I love talking about it.
Well, and I think that what new parents don't realize is that the skills they're learning in pregnancy and the things they're learning to let go of and the way they're adapting to change really moves forward as life skills, or if they keep resisting it, makes their future life 10 times harder. And I've watched you because your husband is in the military, Matt is here and there all over the place. And you guys, it's a constant change. And the skills and the way that you share what you've learned, I really want new parents to kind of understand that what they're going through are life skills that are building for the future, and also of how they're going to parent this kid, because we don't know what we're getting with kids. And we don't know the challenges they're going to show up with. We don't know the advocacy level that we're going to need for them, as well as ourselves during pregnancy, labor, and postpartum. So I want to start there. When you first came into hypnobirthing, you had some fears and some worries and some concerns, but you did want a natural birth. So kind of tell me about the early part of your pregnancy before you came into class.
Right. So pregnancy is San Diego, California. Started the journey wanting a midwife. I didn't see myself in a hospital setting. I didn't see it in the traditional, what you see in TVs and movies. I wanted something a little bit more laid back. I saw a water birth. I envisioned no epidural and essential oils and just a more relaxed, a little bit more organic experience, kind of going back to what birth was before the 1900s and 2000s. And so I was suggested by my midwife at UCSD to find some birth classes to arm myself with some information, and found the Birth Education Center. I found hypnobirthing classes, and after a little bit of research, the thinking of hypnobirthing and all of the qualities I was searching for just aligned. And walked into the first hypnobirthing class and turned to my husband, and it was what we wanted. It was the universe had pointed us in this direction, and that's how we started on our hypnobirthing journey.
Well, and when you came in wanting that, you were with a great hospital with the midwives, and medical diagnoses started showing up while you were in class. And every week we kind of worked on something different, whether it was boundaries with your mom, or, oh my gosh, now I have gestational diabetes. What do I do with that? And how is this going to fit into my plan? Can you tell me a little bit about the expectations, probably some disappointments in there, and how you were managing that through the series?
Gosh, yeah. First diagnosis that rolled through was gestational diabetes at the end of my second trimester, piled on by cholestasis of the liver, which only symptom for me was itchy hands and feet. I thought I was just going crazy. It was another crazy pregnancy thing. soon after followed by preeclampsia. I just had this trifecta of conditions. And that started with going to my care team and my midwife and, all right, maybe you're not going to do a water birth or be able to labor in a tub, but this is what it could look like. So we, in the classroom setting, some people wanted to do a water birth at home and some people wanted the traditional OBGYN in a hospital setting. Some people had a little mix of both. And I felt every week, given the tools in hypnobirthing and given each diagnosis, it was shifting gears, and it wasn't changing my birth plan in a way that I wouldn't have a birth that I wanted. I still very much had the birth that I wanted, but it was under my terms. And given the thinking of hypnobirthing and the tools I was given and my birth plan, setting out a birth plan, if this happens and this changes, it's going to be okay. So that was probably the biggest benefit of hypnobirthing, was imagining it one way and being just okay if the universe said it wasn't going to happen that way, and it was a different scenario than originally imagined.
And we're so tied up sometimes with the birth plan going the way it's supposed to go because everyone has a birth plan. And if you're so rigidly tight against this, how it has to go, once again, you're causing more suffering as the baby and the body and the universe changes things up. Like, it might not be your provider that shows up that day because they're in a snowstorm and they didn't make it. Now what? Like, there's little things that can sometimes derail this perfect, ideal plan, which is why we call them birth preferences instead of plan. Like, it's good because plans are always broken. How do you adapt to that? And I remember Matt when he came in, he's so cute. You guys have to meet Matt. He's so cute. But he just got more and more engaged every single week. And I could tell that his advocacy brain of, okay, she's my first line to protect, and my voice is the next thing that needs to be 100% there. No matter what, if I forget a skill, I've got a doula, but my voice has to be the number one thing. How did that play out?
I will say those birth preferences came into play. I think I had maybe 2 pages of preferences, especially given what I was working with. And at the time, I wasn't necessarily allowed to have just a midwife team. I needed an OBGYN present as well. And I remember at one point, the OBGYN told me I had to have an epidural or break my waters. And giving the way that I could advocate for myself and my husband could advocate for me, and neither of us knew for certain, in the way we did after hypnobirthing classes, that self-advocating was a thing in the medical field, and it's still something I practice to this day with therapists and doctors and my primary doctor. We were in a setting where this OBGYN offered that, and the nurse kind of had to nudge and whisper and say, this mother did not want to be offered that at all. It is listed right here. And didn't want to embarrass the OBGYN, but thank you for stepping up for me. And there were a few times the same person, one or two providers, kind of overstepped my wants and my needs, and really tried to steer me and pigeonhole me into something I knew I didn't want. And I knew that there were other options at the time and as I progressed. And in those moments when I wouldn't say think for myself, but I was in a whole different plane. I'm off in a different universe on a different timeline. Matt and the doula that I had present were there advocating for me and saying, hey, as per page 2, paragraph 3, section B, don't even say the E word. Don't even offer her an epidural, because there were a few salty, choice, unkind words that in the middle of a surge, in the middle of a contraction, I had for the provider. So to have my husband there, to know that preference back and forth, and then to step in was magic. And that was like a love language in the moment. It wasn't just food and it wasn't just comfort, but knight in shining armor riding over and defending me and fighting for me, which you wouldn't think you would need to do during a birth. You wouldn't need to do during this magical, life-changing shift of the universe within our family unit. But there was Matt, fighting and advocating for me.
I got goosebumps. Well, and it can be a magical moment if you go in understanding that it is your moment, right? And it's worth defending and it's worth talking about. And I think that you guys had such a good team going in. I want to get to the birth story. So tell me how it all started, because it wasn't and spontaneous labor, because it was an induction, because of all of your symptoms and stuff. So when did you guys decide on the date for labor to
So
begin?
I got a call, I believe by the time I got my preeclampsia diagnosis, around 34, 35 weeks, that, hey, for the safety of both of you and all of the constant monitoring, I want to say 3 or 4 times a week, I was going in, that I needed an induction, a medically necessary induction. And I had the call from the midwife. Her name was Pam. God bless her. I wish I remembered her last name right now.
She's fantastic. She's fantastic.
And is she still there? God, oh my God. Oh no, I'm gonna
Yep,
cry.
she's
Um,
still there.
she was the mother to her daughter's an Air Force wife. So we bonded over this phone call, and I released all of my fears, as I did in hypnobirthing, over this. It must have been an hour-long call with her. She was on call at the hospital, wasn't the active midwife at the time. And she just took her time with me, which I appreciate, seeing eye to eye with a provider, a caregiver, anyone that is going to be so important in my life. And we set it up at, I believe, 37 weeks one day. And oddly enough, I chose that day, March 29th, was the day before my dad's birthday. And he had passed away 4 years previous. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go through this induction, and I'm going to give birth on my dad's birthday. And it's going to be this magical thing that I'm bringing this life in on my dad's birthday after he's passed. Didn't happen that way. Why would it? Once again, the universe. And I'm a little bit happy that it happened that way. So that Stella has her day and my dad George has his day. So I go in on a Monday, the 29th. We start with some Cervidil, something nice and light. Maybe they can get my body awake and ready and relaxed. And second round the next day, Tuesday morning, nothing's really happening. And they said, all right, we're going to start you on some Pitocin. We're going to maybe try to get some surges going. I hadn't dilated very much. I think my cervix had ripened a centimeter, maybe 2 or 3 max. So they start the Pitocin. And a few hours in, I've got some really, really strong lower back pain, discomfort, and spent hours in the shower, hours being massaged by my doula, my husband. Both of them said the next day, the following days, that they had full body aches. And being an empathetic person, and I've just given birth, I felt so bad that they got a full body workout. But the Pitocin was just racking. Yeah,
Kaylee
racking.
did get a full body workout, and I remember her talking about that, and she goes, it was worth it to watch what happened in that room.
Yeah,
Like,
she's
it changed her too.
so petite, but she was climbing on that bed like she was a 6'6" linebacker, and giving me a deep tissue Swedish massage to help me through some of those surges. Um, but the Pitocin, it was doing its job. Not the best. So we get to day 3, and the preeclampsia is starting to ramp up. My blood pressure is getting a little crazy. And at one point, I'm having a discussion with OBGYN and midwife and other medical professionals that your blood pressure is getting to an unsafe place where you might seizure. Here are the potential outcomes. Here are what we can do to alleviate this risk associated with everything. So I felt very, very happy that I was being once again armed with information. And I ended up having magnesium, which was a little bit of a blessing. I was falling asleep in between surges, and finally we're getting a drop in fetal heart rate. Blood pressure had finally stabilized. and we decided to break my water. And that's kind of where things really started to come to a head in my labor journey.
Because the reason he wanted to give you, or one of your physicians, I remember we talked about that earlier in our pre-conversation, that he wanted to get you to break your water or get an epidural, because getting the epidural can lower your blood pressure. And so
Right.
that's probably why he was thinking, let's jump on this and do it. But that's not what your plan was. Your
Correct.
preference was no medication that blocks everything.
Correct. And I think I still had fears wrapped up around what could go wrong with an epidural. And I did want to be physically present for the birth of Stella. I wanted to be able to move. Movement was a big thing for me. I've played sports my whole life. I have ADHD. I like to move. My attention span's about this big. So movement was a big thing for me. And that epidural, I felt, limited me on the comfortable positions I wanted to labor in, or the ability to get up and be in the shower or on the toilet or on my side or on all fours.
And how many hours because you had back labor. So not only were you laboring with no medication in with full on Pitocin, and if you guys have ever had Pitocin contractions, they're not easy, and they start at the very top and then they get softer after that. So it hits you right up front and then gets softer. So it takes a different kind of breathing, a different kind of technique to use with them. And you're laboring with back labor, which is baby's kind of sunny side up and putting a lot of pressure on that tailbone during the whole time, which is why she's getting the Swedish massage forever. How many hours was that back labor part?
So the Pitocin started, I think, 26 or 28 hours in, and about another 26, 28 hours of the Pitocin. So I would say nearly 24 hours of back labor. And yeah, I've dropped the word magical a few times, but there was a lot of nitty, there was a lot of nitty gritty. Matt would say when a surge hit at one point and I was mid standing up, and he's got me, there was nothing for me to grab onto, and I end up grabbing the floating rib right here, and held onto it as a surge hit. So Matt's wording would probably not be magical in some of those moments, but the back labor I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But once again, the tools and breathing techniques of, I can visualize, I can do anything for 60 seconds. I can get through this. I can think about anything else except what's radiating from one part of my body right now.
Absolutely incredible, because back labor by itself is not pleasant when you add the Pitocin. And I can imagine that the magical was fuck. And oh my gosh, how can I get through this? And I can see why the intensity for Matt to be watching that is pretty. I don't think we give partners enough credit for watching someone they love go through something so intense, painful, miserable, and feel absolutely in the moment in, I'm not doing enough and I can't fix this.
Yeah, I don't think Matt ever felt helpless. I don't think I ever felt helpless. He was armed with what he needed. He knew that I'm so stubborn that, once again, those preferences and what was being offered, that we're going to get what we need. Stella's going to get here just fine. We have another support person in Kaylee, my doula, quite a few of the nurses. There is nothing better than a labor and delivery nurse, in my opinion. They get the best job all day long bringing those babies earthside. And I don't think that helpless was ever a word that we would have felt in those 3 days of laboring. But I mean, fuck was absolutely one of the words.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear that, because I have heard that from so many dads feeling like, I just want to be there and take this away and I can't. And I'm glad that Matt didn't feel that way.
Yeah, I think he knew who he married. He saw it. We had been married for 5 years before I gave birth. He knew that if Courtney wanted this, Courtney was going to get what she wanted. So helplessness, I think that feeling started ebbing away during class. And as much as we're alleviating the maternal fears or the birther's fears, Matt took away so much from hypnobirthing as well. So helplessness, I don't think was in our vocabulary, even with the health diagnoses that we had stacked against us.
That's so great. So here you are still in your laboring, and you've got your magnesium going, which if you guys don't know how magnesium affects somebody when they're in labor, it can either make them so drowsy they can't keep their eyes open, and it is meant to make you very lethargic and very limp so that your body cannot seize, and especially if our blood pressure is going higher, that can also lower that. It's a very delicate balance when the providers are using magnesium to make sure that they don't give you too much. How did that magnesium affect? Did it let you sleep in between, or did it kind of relax your body enough to just be like, okay, I can get the rest of this labor done?
I think it was more blessing than curse. I had been very hesitant when I was being given my options with the blood pressure being so high, my blood pressure being so high, that I was hesitant. And once it started going, sleeping between those surges was magic. The 3 minutes, the 2 minutes, the 1 minute between surges as things ramped up was a deep sleep. It's that sleep after, you've been on a 17-mile hike. So I would fall into a deep sleep in between those surges, very relaxed. But it did, on the other hand, make things complicated communicating with the care team. And once again, having Matt in the room and my doula in the room and these nurses that were so well versed in my care plan and my preferences, that's why we had it in place. So that magnesium was working against me. And eventually I got gas and air. UCSD at the time offered gas and air to alleviate some discomfort. And I was deep breathing from that, like my life depended on it. But in between those surges, the little cat naps curled into the dark corner of my hospital bed, and I pulled a pillow over and I made it as dark as possible, and that's where I naturally went, curled into this corner.
And were you on all fours? Like, what position was your go-to as you're taking those naps in between?
So that was on my side. It was just so uncomfortable to be on my back. I think we did try to alleviate early on some bouncing on the yoga ball. And that was okay when I was still moving a little bit more freely. But as the magnesium set in, when I started to labor, all fours was what I had practiced. It was what I was comfortable with. And and that is how I ended up giving birth, was on all fours. They had turned me onto my side and lifted my leg. And I don't remember what I was saying, but it was probably in the negative, or pushing back, guys, I don't know. And here's my doula stepping in from the corner of the room or next to my head, wherever she had been. And she said, "Do you remember, Courtney, they had practiced being on all fours?" And I shifted to all fours and felt so comfortable. Asked Matt to raise the blinds and put on, at the time, Iration is my jam. So he put on Iration's Fly With Me. And I want to say about the song played twice and Stella was out. It wasn't, once again, not magical as I'm pushing and her head crowns. There was one, when we talk about Stella being born, her head crowns, and Matt goes, "Yeah, you said ow twice." So you hear in my birth footage, "Ow!" This kind of nasally, loud, cranky, and then another "ow." And that was it. She was out. She was earthside. I said ow twice, but thinking of the 56 hours to get there, if I only said ow twice, just and we talked about how the universe aligns. That phone conversation I had with Pam kind of really stuck with me. I had seen her when I checked in for my induction, and these midwives rotate shifts. And at the time, I was supposed to be giving birth with an OBGYN because of the complications. Pam just happened to be on shift as the midwife on call. She wasn't the main midwife at the time, but she was the midwife on call that was making calls to people that needed inductions or the moms that needed to come in to give labor. And I said the hour before I gave birth, I want Pam, I want Pam, I want Pam. And I have these beautiful pictures from both Kaylee and my birth photographer. And I'm going to cry. I thank God I didn't wear mascara for this. I'm going to cry. I have these pictures of Pam at my bedside as I'm going through these surges, and my face is in the side of the bed, and she's smoothing back my hair, very in a very maternal way. And Pam was there. Pam was the one that caught Stella when she came out. You know, it was supposed to be the OBGYN, and Matt was so afraid of fumbling the pass. And there was Pam, this person I'd had the hour-long conversation with and connected with. And I called out for Pam the hour before I gave birth. And there she was. And Pam was the one that caught Stella. Pam was there. She was scheduled. And the universe aligned for this magical person to be there for my birth.
No coincidence.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely no coincidence. I'm covered in goosebumps. Pam, when you listen to this, you're going to be covered in goosebumps too, because I know you remember this birth.
I'm gonna dig up that picture. I'm gonna find that picture and send that, because that image just is seared in my memory. That is the picture
I would
of
love
my
to
birth.
include that in the video. Yeah, I remember the pictures from your birth. They're vivid in my mind because I know the story behind it, and I know what you had gone through during that birth, and how resilient and how hard it was. And I want to give you credit for how hard it was. I don't know if people understand how hard it was, but you did it with saying ouch twice. Like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, I you know, talking about being on all fours and positioning and such, and circling back to how Matt was feeling, his advice that he'd been given from so many other fathers, kind of the more traditional, old schooly fathers, was don't go below her head. And we did hypnobirthing classes, and he goes, I'm going to go wherever wherever this lady tells me is where I'm going to go. And I remember once I'd switched all fours, he started petting my rump, you know, and I look back at him like I am not a horse, I am not a cow. But he thought it was comforting. It was comforting, but I just thought it was so funny. And another image that is captured while Pam's there catching Stella, Matt is down. Matt's kneeled down, and he's got his hand on his chin, and just this look of joy over his face as Stella's coming out, and Matt's got the back view of Stella coming out. So helpless wasn't a thing. Just joy. So positions and Matt and Pam, just all of it came together.
Oh, I'm so glad you have those pictures. I'm so glad you can have those for Stella too. Like, look at when Dad's seeing you for the first time. Like, that was captured.
And then Kaylee, my doula, vlogged quite a bit of it. So there's a little bit of video footage. And once Stella came out in my magnesium induced state, something from hypnobirthing class and the newborn 101, all these additional classes that I took, breastfeeding, struck me. And from my bed, I'm like, don't wipe off the and Kaylee goes, oh, don't wipe off the vernix, you know. This is what Courtney wants. So from across the room, as I'm going in and out of sleep trying to birth the placenta, Kaylee's still there, Matt's still there, advocating with the NICU team in room to make sure that they're not wiping Stella off, as they're making sure she was safe and healthy.
And tell our listeners what you think the best takeaways from having a doula were at your birth. I know a lot of people are on the fence by it. They're like, no, my partner can do everything. And I'm like, yeah, but sometimes a wingman and that extra support really makes a difference, especially with an induction, because you don't know how they're going to go. Well, any labor, you don't know how it's going to go. But just tell the listeners what the best part about having a doula was, especially in your case.
She was what I would call my Swiss Army knife. And I think all doulas are like this. She wasn't just for me, she was also for Matt. She was for Stella. It wasn't just the massage, it wasn't just the advocating, it wasn't just the comfort. And she was a mother herself 3 times over when I gave birth. So she knew, and she had experienced birth in a few different ways herself. She knew that things changed. So having that Swiss Army knife of a magic little bundle of a woman, a firecracker, I shouldn't even say bundle, was integral to, I think, how things progressed. I don't think things would have been drastically different, but she was a game changer. There were times where I wasn't sleeping at all and Matt was exhausted. So Kaylee was up with me, and they would rotate. And being a military family, we were 3,000 miles away from both of our families. Both of our moms are on the East Coast. And you talked about setting boundaries earlier. We set the boundary that we don't want any moms there at the birth. We've got Matt, we have Kaylee, and it wasn't anything they pushed back, but Kaylee was so, she filled in all of the crevices of, you have a midwife and an OBGYN, and you have the nursing staff. You've got mom, you've got dad, and Kaylee did everything in between. So Kaylee was my Swiss Army knife.
We all need doula shirts that say that. It is true, because you pull out a tool for everything, and then you put one away and you grab another, and that doesn't work. Great. Okay, let's try this. Oh, that's such a good visual for me. Yeah, Kaylee's phenomenal.
If it wasn't honey sticks, and if it wasn't massage, if it wasn't feeding me, or getting a scrunchie, or talking with the nurse, or contacting my birth photographer, or it was something. So it was such a blessing to have someone like that with us.
Yeah, it's so great. I'm so glad you had her. So let's take our birth stories. So you guys were doing this 7 years later. So she's had 7 years to be a parent, a wife, a military wife, because that's a whole other ballgame, and move into her own life after having a baby. So can we talk about how the skills and the things that you learned in your birth have kind of moved you into parenting and just being an adult, a more adult woman?
Yeah, I think that flexibility is a skill that everybody should work on in all seasons of their life. And moving through my story, moving through my diagnoses, being flexible, and as parents, never say never is kind of the motto. I'll never use a pacifier. I'll never use non-organic, or I'll never not have an epidural, right? Maybe I changed my mind in the moment. Never saying never keeps you humble, because parenthood will humble you every day of the week. And we've done international moves, we've done deployments, we've worked through Stella adjusting to all of these things. And I mean, several different moves. Never saying never and staying flexible is the only way to set yourself up for success. I pictured parenthood a little bit different. I don't even remember what I thought it would be. It's a wild journey, and I learn more about myself as I learn my child and meet my child at every stage of her life. So what I thought it was, parenting a newborn and a toddler and a preschooler and now an elementary school age child, I've met a few different versions of Stella, and I've met a few different versions of myself, and staying flexible and communicative is integral to maintaining that flexibility.
And when I think about, as you know, we get further away from our birth, right, where it sets the stage for what's happening, we see not only our baby moving into these different stages, but we also see how we were parented in these different stages. And we get like flashbacks of like what our parents did or didn't do, or things that we're like, ooh, I want to reparent that. So we're not only reparenting our kid with a different method of how that worked, or taking the good things and doing that with our kid, but we're also finding grace and love, like, oh, I wish that had been handled differently for me. And when I remember watching these kids grow up going, ah, that really hurt me at that point. How can I love my little kid inside me? You know, that inner child that really was hurt by that, and make sure it doesn't happen to my kid. And if it does, because we flash into our old patterns, how do I apologize and make it better? Have you noticed
Right.
any of that with your parenting?
Right. I mean, even 7 years later, if I were to give birth now, what I did 7 years ago is a little bit different than what is done now. I mean, Stella slept in a rock and play. So things have changed. And when I think about my own upbringing, I'm not just a military wife, I'm a military brat. Both of my parents retired Navy. I was in the military, met my husband in the Navy, and now I'm a Navy wife. So I got the trifecta going on. And I think about my mom giving birth to me, submarine base, Groton, Connecticut. And she turned around and she went to work for 4 weeks, 6 weeks later, which God bless the the maternity leave policy in our country right now. I think about how heartbreaking that is, but all of the differences in parenting and what was offered to her, what her birth experience was like, what her parenting experience was like. And I think of that when I compare myself to my girlfriends. And it really takes a village, it takes resources. So to pull from my mother's parenting story and my girlfriend's parenting stories and what we used to do 200 years ago, what we did 7 years ago. And once again, the flexibility, arming yourself with information, healing from trauma, whether intended or not, and healing the generational trauma. I want Stella to be better than I was. I want her to have all of the things in the world. So if I can move forward living my life like that, that I can heal her and parent her and we can move on together. That's the goal. A happy, healthy, healed child with all of the resources and tools that I can give her.
Yeah, because our kids need so much today. And it's science, it's constantly changing of how we can help them and ourselves too. And I think that's, I'm a big advocate for therapy. I will be in therapy till the day I die. It's the best thing ever. Can you tell our parents, like, what advice would you give new parents as they're coming through their birth experience, as they're starting to parent? What do you wish you had done differently? Or what advice would you give them now?
I would say that the parenting advice for new parents or parents preparing is you don't have to do everything. Social media, here's this beautiful picture of my newborn baby and my beautiful life. I got sucked into that and I was go, go, go after I gave birth. I was out of the house. I was worried about getting back to my part time job. I was worried about running errands. And in the day and age where you can have groceries delivered, you can set up a meal train if you have the village to do it. You can do all of these things. I wish I had taken time to just heal and relax and just exist. I do think that beating myself up and going too far, too fast, too soon absolutely contributed to some postpartum depression and anxiety. I did not set myself up for success. So I think I would absolutely tell parents to take the help, take the time, take the healing. Just everyone and their mother and their grandmother and the random lady in the grocery store is going to tell you it goes by so quickly. And there's always a kernel of truth in that, but less about it goes by so quickly and more just take it slow for yourself. Have grace, have patience, have serenity, have calmness, because down the road it will be go go go, there will be chaos, and having a newborn can be chaotic, but if you have that grace and that patience and the calm, I think it helps heal what you've just gone through, this big life event, and then sets you up for how you're going to parent down the road. So I just wish I had taken time, and within that pathway of thinking, I wish I had taken the time to pump more and put some stuff aside. So on those busy days, or when I did go back to work, that there was a little bit more grace, and my daughter would be fed in the way that I wanted her to. So just taking your time and healing and taking help, that's invaluable.
And I think postpartum, we've got to get that set up way before we have a baby because we're too tired at the end to do it, which is why you're running the errands and doing all the things, especially if you're used to being busy. And that's, one of the reasons that we do relaxations during pregnancy and have built in time for slow down and practice is because when you get to postpartum and you have a baby asleep on you and the dishes are piling up and the house hasn't been vacuumed, you go, okay, I'm fine. It's like a meditation time. I'm just going to take a half an hour because it doesn't matter. But when our lifestyle is so busy, if you've taken the time in pregnancy to slow things down, it's much easier to keep that going in postpartum, at least for the first couple of weeks when you need to recover. And man, after your birth, you needed a recovery time for
Yeah,
real.
yeah, yep. It was special, and I was lucky to have my own community of military moms and friends. I remember coming home and one girlfriend had set up my stroller and there was a pie in my fridge, and she had watched my husky Apollo. She had watched our three animals, and another friend had helped set up the the rest of the nursery and was there. I wish I had just taken them up. I felt bad accepting help. So if I had just released control and had accepted help, I had had one single screening for postpartum depression, I think at my 6 week post birth appointment. And I must have answered positively enough on them. And I had just been asked a really passive question and I brushed it off, but I needed the help. And I knew that I was predisposed to probably having postpartum depression due to my mental health the rest of my life and the rest of my life postpartum now that I'm a parent. I should have accepted the help. And I think that accepting help and slowing down was my biggest life lesson. And it's what I would change realistically.
And I'm sure that you're the helper when people are having babies now because you know what they need.
I mean, we have lived overseas. We are in a new neighborhood in Virginia for the last 2 years. I was in the Outer Banks. I'm meeting women from all walks of life. And when you hear a woman put out some sort of struggle, this woman isn't, more times than not, isn't putting out the struggle of, hey, man, I'm really struggling. You're struggling too. I feel like that is like the smallest, most passive way to ask for help. So if someone in my life is saying, wow, I'm struggling to get child to practice, or I'm out of this ingredient or whatever, it's not a, oh man, that sucks. It's what can I do to help you? And I think that if we as women in general were to step up and do that the healing and the trauma, like all of that would then change for the better.
And it would make a huge difference in what our kids are seeing us model, right?
Right.
Community.
Yep. In the worlds of social media and keyboards and video games and moving inside to play, if we have kids that are seeing the model of a village and help, and parents getting therapy, parents asking for help from their neighbors, parents receiving help without asking, um, you're going to grow up with empathetic little helpers that are good human beings. And when I send Stella off to school, every single morning as she gets on the bus, I give her a kiss and I say, be kind, be a good listener, be a good human. And she gets on the bus with that saying in her mind, on her heart. And just last week, she got the principal's award for fairness, and it was just she's a helper in her classroom, and I hope to raise a kind, healthy, happy human being.
Fantastic. I have no doubt that you will. Courtney, thank you so much for being here today. And please tell Matthew hello and I miss him. I just love that guy.
Absolutely. You know, we talk about you all the time, and next trip to Southern California where the sun is shining and you don't have to wear sweaters until it reaches 70 degrees, I guess. We will
I
absolutely
know.
be.
You're right, because I'm in a tank top today and she's in a sweater. I'm like, different parts
Oh,
of the country, for real.
I have frozen
Yeah, I'll be
toes.
in yeah, and I will be in a tank top until February. I love living
Love
here.
it.
It's so
Love it.
fantastic. Thank you, and we will see everybody next week.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to birtheducationcenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.